spontaneous, spur of the moment, don't even have an outline from my car again because life is crazy. And for the next couple weeks, this might be what you're getting. I don't know. But I just had this thought. As you can see, it is snowing outside again. So I'm doing this really quickly before I go to get groceries. So I wanted to hurry up while it's still light out. Look at all the snow we got out there. While it's still light out, I wanted to go and do all my grocery shopping because we are very low on groceries. And you know how it is the week of Thanksgiving when you're always like, okay, the kids will eat on Thursday. That's kind of what happens. So we've been stretching out the food a long time. So I definitely need to go get some groceries. So I'm sitting out my freezing cold car. It is on, the heat is on, but I just got in here. So we'll see how well this goes. But anyways, I'm once again holding my phone too. So until my hand gets tired, I'll just talk. But I wanted to talk a little bit about this subject about priorities in life and what exactly are my priorities? What have my priorities been since I was a little kid? And, going forth, what are my priorities with my kids? What are my priorities with my adult kids? What are my priorities with my grandbabies? Like all of these things. So from the time that I was little, I was saved when I was 4.5, closer. My birthday was in January. I was saved in August. So kind of close to 5, but I know that's when I got saved. I understood the gospel, and I was a smart cookie when I was a little kid. I was the oldest kid. So, the eldest mentality, I had that. And I listened very intently in church and things. And that's where I first heard a sermon about hell and salvation and all that. So when we got home, I further questioned my dad about it. I got saved. Well, from the time that I was younger, I remember being very passionate about what I believed in. So I was passionate about Jesus. My favorite story was Jesus dying on the cross for us. And I was passionate about telling other kids. I remember being on a playground and telling the kids about Jesus and how he came to die for us, and them like making fun of me and everything. But yeah, I was very, very much passionate about what I believed in as a kid. From the time that I was little, I remember being at a missions conference and really feeling the Lord working in my heart that I wanted to be in full-time service, whether that was a missionary or a pastor's wife. Obviously not a pastor because I am Baptist, and Baptists don't believe in women pastors. But I remember having that tug on my heart from the time that I was little. I also, being raised in church and being raised the way I was, I took purity very seriously. I took marriage. I knew that I needed to marry pure. I needed to marry someone that was going to be, I also, for me, I wanted to marry someone that was pure. So I wanted that in my life. And so that was a priority even as a teenager. Also, I wanted to marry someone, if I was going to get married, I wanted to marry someone going into the ministry. Now, before I met my husband, I was interested in missions work. So going on missions trips, I thought about, as a single girl, 18, 19, I almost took a missions trip to Jamaica or one of those places. But then when I was 19 years old, my husband and I started a relationship, and the rest is history. So from a young girl, my priority was that I wanted to serve the Lord. I wanted to love the Lord, live my life for the Lord, and marry someone with those same goals. So from the time I got married, I also had some priorities. And, every one of us is going to have different priorities. So for some women, their priority is a career. For other women, their priority is marrying someone who's just going to provide a cushy life for them and traveling the world and, just seeing all the sights and just having fun. That's a priority for other women. But I wanted to just kind of talk today to you moms that are watching, because it seems very daunting for a good couple decades of your life for your priorities to be your husband and your kids. And I understand that. But I want to tell you that the payout of making those decisions is huge. because it's so much nitty gritty work, right? From the time that you start having kids, even your marriage is nitty gritty work. It's very, it takes a lot of work, whether it comes to communication or just putting your husband first, putting your kids' needs above your own. That takes a lot, because we have to, as moms, we have to die to self daily, sometimes multiple times a day. We have to die daily, figuratively. I'm not saying literally. We have to figuratively die daily to our needs and our wants. And it's tough. It's tough being a mom and having to get up with kids puking in the middle of the night. It's tough making sure that we prioritize our husband's needs above our own. And if he is a good husband, he will also prioritize your needs above his own. But obviously this show is not for husbands. Go listen to my husband's podcast for men if you want that. But this is for women. And so we have to die daily over and over again, as a wife, as a mom. But it's going to be worth it. Okay, it's going to be worth it. And I am now reaping the fruit of making those decisions as a young bride. So as a young bride, I decided that I was going to prioritize my marriage, because I had often heard, and I've watched different families and things throughout the years, and I learned different things from watching different families. And I had often seen marriages that stayed together until the kids were grown, and then they divorced. And I never really understood that, because I'm like, why would you invest 25, 30, 40 years into this marriage and then just walk away? So for me, remaining close was a high priority. So it looked differently when our kids were little than it looks like now. When our kids were little, we would often, when we lived by family, we had babysitters, because my mother-in-law would, or my mom would babysit the kids, but we didn't have that option once we moved here 14 years ago. And so we did have a teenage girl that we really trusted that would watch the kids about once a month, something like that. But we didn't have an option very much to leave our kids with babysitters. So oftentimes I would do date nights at home. Another thing that was really important with my marriage was we put the kids to bed early. So when they were younger, they had a bedtime of between 7 and 8 p.m. because that was kind of after they were put to bed and asleep by usually 8:30. Then that was kind of our time to reconnect with each other, whether that was just talking, whether that was watching a movie together or a show together. There's been different games and things that we've gotten into playing, like computer games. So we found something that we could do when the kids were small. And even that came to hobbies. We would go bike riding a lot. That's free. Hiking, that's free. We could bring the kids with us. They could tag along. We got little carry things that they would sit in that my husband would pull in his bike. I had a seat on the back of my bike that we would put the baby in. So we came up with things to keep us close and connected, because that was really important to me. Also, as a younger bride, I knew that, the physical intimacy was an important thing, and that can be really tough when you have little kids. And, obviously, if you have an understanding husband, he's not going to make it a big deal if you've been up all night with puking kids and, it's just not going to happen or whatever. But as a wife, I realized that I needed to put that priority kind of high on the list, because men are more prone to need that, in the relationship. And we are the ones that are supposed to fulfill that need for desire for our husbands. So that was always very important to me. Now, when it came to raising children, obviously one of my main priorities as a mom was that my kids would hopefully come to know Jesus as their Savior very early on. And for almost all my kids, that has happened primarily because and this is something that we don't push very very hard, because we want the Holy Spirit to be working on them, and we don't want to play Holy Spirit. But my kids hear the gospel a lot because they go soul winning with us, and so they really start hearing the gospel from the time that they're very young. They're hearing that gospel message. So we have to just really wait until they start coming to us and asking questions. First of all, is what we do. And then we follow up with that, of course. But I'm keeping an eye on my car because it does weird things sometimes. So they come to us and start asking. And then when we feel like they've been asking us a lot, then we'll kind of go deeper into it. And just last week, Hannah actually prayed and believed on Jesus, and she's 5 now. So I knew she was getting close, because most of my kids are on 5 or 6 because they're around it so much, right? Because they hear the gospel presented so many times when they're out soul winning with us. They know it, but I wait until it's more than just facts, and it's actually, I can tell God's working on their heart. So I wait until they get to that point before I take it further. And Hannah, I felt, seemed to really get it. She understood she was a sinner. She understood that Jesus came and paid for her sins. And she understood that she was just getting to heaven by believing on him. And so she did pray and ask him to save her. So that was last week, on my husband's birthday, actually. But it had been a while, like leading up to it. There had been several weeks, months of her like starting to ask questions, and, you know, kind of, I could tell she was thinking about it a lot. So for all my kids, it's been around 5 or 6 that they really start asking questions about salvation and things. And God has now granted me that desire, right? So they've all prayed and they've all believed on Jesus for salvation. Another thing for me when it came to my kids is that they would grow up knowing why we do what we do and why we believe what we believe. And so we've always tried with our children to tell them the biblical reasons, and not just, well, because I said so, because, you know, whatever, because we want them to have a heart knowledge, not just a head knowledge. Like, anyone can rattle off facts, right? Anyone can rattle off facts, but you want to get it as a parent into your children's hearts, so that it soon goes from being your desire and your way of life to becoming their desire and their way of life. As parents, that's the goal. Like, we want them to be able to walk out of our house and then have it in their heart to serve the Lord and to love the Lord. And so when it came to that, I think the biggest thing that my husband and I had to do was we had to also live it. You know, we couldn't just give lip service to things. Our kids had to see us living it in the home. So our kids had to see us having a good marriage, and our kids had to see us loving God, and our kids had to see us, you know, putting the things of the Lord first. Our kids had to see that it was real to us and that it was lived in the home, because that is the biggest testing ground of your faith, is the home. That's where you prove what you believe or what you don't believe, because anyone can get up and say anything. I can get on Gently Led Sisters and say anything, but am I living that in my home? And that's why I know for me, I've determined that I'm not going to ever talk about a subject on this show that I myself don't do, or that I myself don't believe. Because first of all, these videos are forever. Someone can download it tomorrow and it's out there forever. And my kids can pull up any video where I'm talking and they'll be like, Mom, why is she saying this? Like, she didn't do this at home. You know, why is she talking about having a good relationship with Dad when at home she was terrible to him and she talked awful to him? And I don't ever want that to be true with me. So I want to publicly only say things that I also privately do in my own home, because I truly do believe that the home is the biggest testing ground for your faith. And our children are our fruit to what went on in our home. So if my kids are out there and they're saying, you know, my mom and dad hate each other, you know, they were always fighting and screaming and throwing things, I would definitely, as a listener, rethink listening to anything I say about marriage. Because if I can't even live it in my home, why am I telling other women how to have a good marriage, or, you know, how to live or whatever? So, the home is the biggest testing ground. So I knew that I had to, and just based off of things that I had seen, the families that had the best outcomes with children were the families that also lived it in their home, and their kids knew it. So their kids knew this is real to Mom and Dad. So yesterday we had this huge snowstorm, right? And we were getting ready for church, and Kelly was like, is anyone else going to be at church? And I was like, well, I don't know. We'll have to wait and see. And she was like, I know we're going to church because you told us we're McMurtry's and we don't miss church. And I was like, that's true. I said, I'm glad that you're picking up on that. But yes, we are McMurtry's, and come hell or high water, we're going to try to make it to church, you know? And So oftentimes we'll just kind of pave the way. We'll brave the roads, or my husband will go before and see how bad the roads are. But there's been a few occasions where I have puking kids, or something, some unforeseen circumstance has kept us from church. But my kids have always known it, and they've said, we're McMurtry's. We don't skip church. Like, that's just a McMurtry thing. So I've tried to really impart that to my children by living it. Now, I'm not talking about like I'm puking and then I'm like, oh, well, I don't care if anyone gets it and I go to church. Obviously, there's situations where you don't want to go to church because of that. But, my kids know that even if it's snowing, if it's raining, if there's a tornado forecast in the future, we can go in the basement of the church, right? We're going to get to church and we're going to go to church. So I know church, Bible reading, really following the commandments of God, those have been big things in my home, in my life, that I've tried to do. Now, I actually have some women that watch my show that aren't even Christians. And, but they still have priorities for their kids. And we've talked about it. They still want to raise children who aren't bullies. They still want to raise kind children. Even if they don't have the God aspect of it, there is a sense of morality. Like, they want to raise functioning members of society. They want to raise healthy children, and I think that those are all really, really good goals and priorities. But for me, being the way that my husband and I take our faith so seriously, it was a huge priority in our own life that our children saw our faith being lived out, that they saw their dad being a good dad, that they saw their dad being a good husband to their mom. I've often heard men podcasters say the biggest way that you can raise good, healthy boys is by loving their mom and loving her well. And I see that coming true even in my own life, like with my own sons. And the best thing that their dad did, I believe, one of the best things is that he loved me, and he loved me well. And he still loves me well, because they've seen that. They need to see marriages that survive storms and, sickness and financial difficulties and all sorts of things. They need to see that strong union between you two. And it's not a secret that marriages are falling apart left and right. But the secret in success of raising good children and healthy, balanced adults too, it's not just keeping a marriage together and never divorcing, because there are so many marriages out there where they're nightmares and they make the home miserable. If mom and dad are fighting all the time, their kids are going to grow up and they're going to, they're going to grow up, first of all, hating the idea of marriage. If all they saw was war and fighting in the home, they're going to grow up and they're not going to even desire marriage or anything like that. So, you need to show them that marriage is good, and, you give them their first glimpse of what a healthy relationship looks like. So with my kids, my priority was raising kids where the faith was real. Like, their dad and I showed them that we truly believe these things. We're not just saying things. Some of my priorities, some of my things that never were priorities. Let's talk about that for a second. So, wealth has never been my priority, which is good because I married a poor preacher. Having wealth has never been my priority. And since the day that we got married, we have lived very, very moderately on a very meager salary for the most part. God has definitely blessed us as far as, you should see like where I live. I live on 3 acres in the country in a smallish house, but it meets all of our needs. It has everything I wanted. Basically, when I got a house, I wanted a schoolroom, I wanted a big kitchen, and I wanted 2 bathrooms. So those were like my only things I wanted. And I got it. I got a big kitchen, which I love having a big kitchen because I'm in it so much, right? I got my schoolroom, and it's such a cute schoolroom. If you've seen pictures of my house, I have a fireplace, I have shelves, tons of shelves just filled with books, and I love the color I picked out for it, and I just love it. I love my schoolroom. And I got my 2 bathrooms, so now we actually have 3 bathrooms, really only 2 still working though. So we only have 2 working bathrooms at the moment. But God has granted me the desires of my heart, and I never dreamt when I first got married that I would have what I have now. I never dreamt that. I have chickens. I have 3 acres of land the kids can go play in, so, but it's it's not a mansion, it's not anything that the world would look at and consider me successful. They would not look at my house and consider me successful, but it has everything I want. It's small, it's cozy. Because it's smaller, my kids actually can't really go out and hide anywhere. You know where the kids are the majority of the time? They're in my living room, my kitchen, my schoolroom, and my room. Like that part of the house. The back bedrooms, barely anyone ever goes into. They're not bedroom kids. You see all the things about people that say that they were raised in the 90s and they were like bedroom kids. My kids aren't bedroom kids. Like the bedrooms get used for sleeping, and that's about it. And sometimes not even that, because the babies like sleeping on the couch. So we have a really, really big couch. And so my home is it's perfect for us. It meets our needs. So wealth was never one of my priorities. A huge house was never one of my priorities. A super modern, nice house was never one of my priorities. I knew when I married my husband that things were going to be meager. I knew pastors didn't make much, especially in the IFB world, and he has not. He makes enough. He makes enough to pay our bills. And the bills have increasingly got larger, especially the last couple of years, because of our kids driving. Their car insurance is through the roof. Because of kids driving, because of all the cell phones on our plan, different things like that. Groceries, obviously, for this big family. But God provides. And we are not late on our bills. We pay all our bills. We have just enough. And God is good. So, wealth was never my priority. When we got married, traveling was never my priority. Like, I never once in a million years dreamt that I would be traveling to London, or I would get to go to Hawaii or any of these places. Like that, just for me to visit Buckingham Palace, that was like a dream when I was a kid, like some far off, that'll never happen because only rich get to travel, right? Well, because I think traveling has become so much more accessible to just normal people like us that make meager salaries, and you can find so many deals. And I've learned how to find deals, and I've learned how to get cheap plane tickets, because plane tickets are so cheap now and it's so easy to do, right? So traveling was never on my list of priorities. I just never thought it would happen. But I think because God loves me, he has allowed me some opportunities to be able to travel. And then even with friends being in different states, I can find a $50 Frontier plane ticket round trip, and we can do things really, really cheaply. And I think just that's part of God just giving me above and beyond, right? Even though that was never a priority for me. Another thing that was never a priority was actually notoriety or fame or anything like that. Literally, when I got married, I wanted to raise good kids. I wanted to have a good marriage, and I wanted to raise good kids. That was my top 2 priorities. Obviously, number 1 was loving God and following him, and, staying true to him, and, keeping sin out of my life and all that stuff. That was number 1. But right after that, my next 2 priorities was I wanted a good marriage and I wanted to raise good kids. And not only raise good kids, but I wanted to have a good relationship with my children. And I'm still always working on that, because your relationship is going to change through the years, which is something I'm finding that no one really prepared me for. Kelly is jumping on the trampoline in the snow. How do you know that you're a true Midwestern kid? You're out when it's 31 degrees outside, you're jumping on the trampoline covered with snow. She's out there right now jumping on the trampoline. And it's still snowing. So it's like still snowing out. Crazy kids. Crazy kids. But notoriety and, people knowing me, that was never really, I lost my train of thought. Oh, different seasons in life. So yes, your relationship with your kids changes throughout the years, and I'm still trying to figure out the good balance, because I'm new to this mother-in-law thing. I'm only like 2.5 years in. So I'm figuring out the correct balance between caring for my children and wanting to be involved in their lives without overstepping overstepping my role or overstepping boundaries, different things like that. And it's so different when you have adult children, just learning the line between giving advice and letting them be adults. because our kids really need us to let them be adults. And obviously my relationship looks different through the years, and it looks different with my 5-year-old than my almost 24-year-old, that all looks different. So it's always navigating that. So I wanted to raise good kids, but I also wanted to raise children who I had relationship with past the point that they left my house. I didn't want to just like get to this magic age of 18 and then be like, oh, well, I'm washing my hands, I'm done. Goal accomplished. I got them to the marriage altar pure and they're married now, not my problem. No, like I want to be super involved in my grandbabies' lives because I can have an impact on them. I want to be super involved in my kids' lives because a parent's influence never goes away. It never goes away. You can continue to be a good influence in your children's lives even after they're out of their home. And I would say that even for like my husband, whose parents, he's been out of the house longer than he was in, how he lives his life still plays a role because both his parents are still alive. I have a mom and a stepdad. My dad went to heaven when I was 17. But we're both very, very much, sorry, I'm looking for something here. We're both very, very much concerned about how our life can still affect our parents. And obviously I still want my mom to be proud of me. I want my dad who's in heaven to be proud of me. I don't know if he can see anything. I don't know if he can look down, but I want him to be proud of the woman that I am, the grandma that I am, right? The friend that I am, the church member that I am, the wife that I am to my husband. I want him to be proud of me as well. And so it's still just the influence that our parents still have in our own lives is huge. And so you're always going to have a lasting impact on your children. Your children are always going to want you to be well pleased in them. They're always going to want to make you proud. It's just a natural desire in us. And if that desire isn't there, then there's something very, very broken. And there's something probably tragic that went on in the home. So, yeah, with my kids, it was to raise functioning adults, but also adults who wanted a relationship with me after they were out of the house. Because then once they start having kids, I want to be involved in my grandkids' lives. I want to do stuff with my grandkids. We have often said, I've seen a lot of other people do it on my Facebook friends, but once we start getting a lot of grandkids, we're going to do what's called like cousin camp. And every summer I want them to come over for a week and then we just do fun stuff. So like we camp outside, we take them to the splash pad, we go fishing, we play cousin games, whatever it is. So I want to be active in their life, as long as I'm able to be. And that's another thing. That's why health is important to me at this time in my life. I'm more focused on my health now than I was in my 20s and 30s because I obviously didn't need to be as much in my 20s and 30s. But now I do because I'm thinking of my grandkids and I want to be involved in their lives as long as possible. And so because of that, I need to focus on my health. I need to get at a good weight. I need to have low blood pressure. I need to have low blood sugar. I need to have, low cholesterol. My numbers have always been fine, but like I need to have good range of those numbers so that I can be here for as many grandchildren as they possibly can be. So yeah, those are my priorities. And I'm telling you, it seems daunting. Like when you're young and you see all of these years, and like I said, you're going to have to put a lot of things on the back burner. I did not have any outside activities at all, until my oldest was 12, almost 13. So almost over a decade, 12 or 13 years, I wholly just poured myself. And I'm talking like I didn't have any outside type of activities as far as like to bring in money, right? Like a side thing. I didn't have anything until Tommy was almost 13. So for those first 13 years, I was just day in, day out, every minute of the day, watching my kids, looking out for my kids, investing in my kids, pouring myself into my family. And it was tough, because I was on the back burner. I didn't get to do a lot of the stuff that brought me some sorts of fulfillment, if you call it that. Like I teach piano now and it's very fulfilling to me. I love teaching kids piano because I know they're going to take that skill in their church and they're going to like for decades, for their whole life. This is going to affect them. And to me, I love that because I'm teaching a future generation of pianists. So that's really fulfilling in a sense to me. But there has not been anything more fulfilling in my life than, number one, hearing my husband talk about how good our marriage is, because he's not just talking, he really means it. And then him liking me, him being in love with me, him thinking him being my best friend. There's nothing more fulfilling than that. There's nothing more fulfilling in knowing that the Lord is pleased with me, because I'm trying to do the Titus 3 thing, right? I'm trying to do what they told us, what the Bible tells us about being a good wife and a good mom, and, loving your kids and loving your husband. And then there's nothing more fulfilling than having children grow up and still like you, and still want to be around you, and still want to be at your house for the holidays, and still just pop in for a visit and text you daily and call you all the time. My son Tommy calls me on the phone all the time still, and I love that, because I'm going to continue to invest in my children and my grandchildren. And so those like temporary side gig things, even Gently Led Sisters, I wouldn't say it brings me like a sense of fulfillment so much, because Gently Led Sisters is low on my priority list. Like I said, I get accused of like wanting this platform, and I was actually kind of drugged into doing Gently Led Sisters. Tommy was only 16, and so I hadn't really raised a kid to adulthood yet. And I was like, well, I guess I could talk about what has worked so far, but it wasn't really tested and tried, right? Because I hadn't raised a kid to adulthood. Well, now I've got half my kids raised, so I feel a little bit more comfortable with like having a platform where I'm giving advice, because once again, I don't want to be a hypocrite. I don't want to give advice. I don't want to say something that, I haven't done myself. So, and I don't want to tell people how to run their lives. I can just give you advice for what has worked in my home, and what's worked in my marriage, and what's worked with raising my kids, right? If you want that fruit. So now I've raised half of my kids, so I feel a little more comfortable. But at the beginning, I was kind of drug into it. And then circumstances beyond my control happened with my co-host, and she had to step down after only 9 months in. So I only had a co-host for 9 months. And then I just continued on with it, because at that time, by the time we started doing it, we actually started getting emails from women, and women that needed help with like different problems that were going on in their life. And so I started to see that it was a very, very specific genre, because there's not many IFB podcasts for women, and there really wasn't like 8 years ago, or however long it was that we started it. So I started noticing that there kind of was a need for it, and so I kept on. But in the grand scheme of things, Gently Led Sisters is very low on my priority list. Like, if I ever felt like it was becoming detrimental to my family, if I ever felt it was detrimental to my marriage, I would get rid of that. Would be one of the first things to go, that, and teaching piano and all my little outside things. Because for me, my biggest priority has always been my home. It's always been my husband. It's always been my kids. So, and it's always God, husband, kids, and then church. That's how it is for me, and in that order. And even with the church is far above Gently Led Sisters as well. And I take my relationships very seriously with people at church. So, I know there's some pastors' wives that kind of have like a wall between them and their church ladies. It's not like that with me. I don't have a wall. I'm their friend. I like having friends. The ones at church are the ones I'm going to spend the most time around in my day-to-day, week-to-week life. So I want to be friends with them. I want to be close to them. Have I gotten hurt? Of course. Okay, of course I've gotten hurt, but that's life. With relationships, it takes risks. You take risk with every relationship, with every friendship. You take a risk. And there is a level of trust there. You are trusting people to be nice with your heart and your emotions. And sometimes you get hurt. But I would rather have the hurt that has happened than not have any relationships at all. So, to me, that is important to me. So yes, the extras are extras, exactly. And oh, thanks, Sarah. I try to keep my priorities in order. But I've often said, like, if these extras or these little things became detrimental in any area of my life, I would eliminate them. When it comes to gently led sisters, my husband has always encouraged that, and it's brought a lot of attacks our way, actually, having gently led sisters and me having a platform from disgruntled nut job preachers that don't like that I have a voice or a platform. It's actually brought a lot of attacks our way, but it doesn't bother me. And I think if it was like getting to me emotionally or whatever, then my husband would say, we need to kind of get rid of it because this is bothering you too much. But he did warn me when I got the gently led sisters. He's like, now, you're going to have a lot of attacks come your way. And at first it was like mainly from like the atheist, like feminist crowd that didn't like me being traditional and talking about being a stay-at-home mom and wife. At first it was from that, but then when we had a falling out from another crowd, then it was relentless. Like the attacks are still relentless when it comes from them. But for it to bother me, it has to be someone who I respect. And for it to bother me, like it would have to be one of my kids that had like a serious problem with me having the show, or my husband having a serious problem with me having the show. Obviously then, bye-bye show. But in order for it to bother me, it has to be someone who I respect and deeply admire, and that just hasn't happened with any of the attacks. So the show continues on. And, I still have women that reach out and tell me it's helpful just to know that moms are going through struggles, right? The sense of community, we definitely need community in our lives. And I love the women in my life who have been open and honest and just talking about how marriage is hard and being a mom is hard and having all these little kids is hard. Like, just admit it's hard. Just admit that it's hard. And we all need that sense of community. And we all need to know that other people are going through it as well, right? And so that's why I think Gently Led Sisters is important for that, just to let other moms know they're not alone. It is hard, but we're here for each other and whatever. So anyways, this is what happens when I don't have an outline. I just go down all these rabbit trails. So those have been the main priorities, and I've tried to keep them. Have I always been perfect? No, but sometimes I can sense when things are getting off. Okay, so I'm putting too much time in this area of my life, and this part is like getting out of control, right? And oftentimes I know that, okay, I need to start saying no to some things, outside activities, whether that's, meetups with friends or whatever it is. I need to say no because my house, it's so dirty, right? I haven't cleaned it well in 2 weeks. So I feel much better. Like when my house is under control, I feel like my whole life is under control. So just this past week when I had a few days off because of Thanksgiving break, we didn't do school and I didn't teach lessons, I got caught up on a lot of deep cleaning projects. And so because I got caught up on that, I got disconnected again. So oftentimes when my house is out of control, I feel out of control. So last week I did some deep cleaning projects, and now I feel like I can just take a deep breath because those things got done, right? So sometimes if we feel like something is off kilter in our life, then we need to just reevaluate and readjust and maybe get our priorities back in order. So for all you ladies watching, I would just encourage you, figure out what your priorities are. What is important to you? Is it important to have a good marriage? Is it important to raise good kids? Is it important to raise kids who love you and want to have a relationship with you even if they're out of the house? If so, it's going to be hard in those first years. It's going to be hard that first decade. It's going to be hard that first decade and a half because you are going to have to put your wants and your desires on the back burner. And you're going to have to pour yourself into your family. But one of these days it's going to be worth it. When your kids walk the marriage altar pure, when they get married to a godly spouse, when they start having kids and you see those grandkids coming and all that, it's going to be so worth it. And my younger sister, my baby sister Bethany, she tells me, she's like, I see your family and I see how your kids have turned out. And she's like, it gives me hope because she's in that midst right now. Like her oldest is 10 maybe. And so she's in the first decade, and she has poured herself into her kids. She homeschools them, she takes them, drives them around to like soccer and music lessons, and literally her life is lived right now for her husband and her kids. But she's like, I see your kids and I know that you did the same at my age. She's like, and so it gives me hope. Like, that's what I want. And to me, that's a huge compliment because that's my younger sibling, right? So now this is a younger sibling. We've always had a very good relationship. She called me mommy when she was little because I was 12 when she was born and I took care of her all the time. Like, my mom nursed her and then I would take care of her. Like, I would rock her to sleep, I would carry her around, I was with her, she was my baby. And so she called me mommy and my mom mommer, which was funny. But so we've always been close, we've always kind of shared that bond, but that really makes me feel good. Like, I have something that someone else, they want that same thing for their life, right? And as Christians, I think all of us should be that way. We should all strive to be good Christians. We should all strive to be an example to others, that when they look at our lives, that's something that they also desire, not something that they're shunning, or they're like, no, I don't want anything to do with that, right? So I know as a wife, as a mom, as a Christian, that's my desire, that something in my life, not like someone's trying to idolize me or like put me on this pedestal. Please don't do that, because I am not perfect and I'm a sinner just like you are. But that they see something in my life that they want that same outcome in their life, you know, and that I can be a good example, because I don't want to be a bad example. I don't want to be, you know, someone that people look at and they're like, oh, I don't want that in my life. So hopefully I can hopefully I can be a good example as a Christian, as a wife, as a mom, to other people, to my own kids, you know, because I want them to have what I've had, because it's been such a good life. So anyways, I know this was an impromptu live and I was all over the place because I have no outline. I was just talking. But I know that we all have priorities in our life. So I would say just figure out what you want yours to be, and then set a goal in your life. Do I want to have a good marriage? All right, I'm going to have these things in place. Do I want to raise good kids? Okay, I'm going to have these things in place, you know, and all that other extra stuff is fluff. And I know it's going to be tough pouring yourself into other people, but the payback and the outcome and the result is so worth it. So just hang in there, young mamas. It is so worth it. I know it seems overwhelming and you're exhausted and you're tired and you can't even remember what day of the week it is because you've been up all night with the kids, but it's going to pay off one of these days. It really is. So anyways, go home. If you're home, stay home. Love God, love your husband, and love your kids, and love them well. And we will see you guys next week.